Now this is the zip bind tool. Sometimes it's called the zip tool, but it's a zip bind tool. We're going to use this later on for either hand binding or stitching in the ditch. This is one of the two pieces that gives you perfect bindings, consistent all the way around. What judges love, the width of the binding on the front being the same as the width of the binding being on the back, and from edge to edge and side to side. But there's a lot of detail in this tool as to how you need to use this to really get perfect results. We're going to look from the side first, and you can see this edge right here is flat versus this piece up here that's slanted. That slanted side has actually a groove inside of here that goes all the way through from here over to here. That groove is where my binding's going to sit. The other side that's flat has what I call the lock line. When we put this on the fabric, this actually goes on the front of your quilt or your place runner, the table runners or placemats or jackets or whatever you're making. And if you see that lock line, you don't have it adjusted correctly. I'll go through 3 rules or 3 clues, and one of those has to do with that lock line. When we look at the length of this, the length of each of those sides is adjusted by these 2 screws here. The more that I have this screw further away from the black handles, the longer this piece is. Now that's for a wider binding, as wide as an inch, as narrow as a quarter of an inch. You'll adjust each side of this tool based on the width of your binding. Now you'll notice there are no markings on here. There never will be. As soon as we put markings on here, then we're going to have to tell you when you use a warm and natural batting that's low loft, when you use a cotton fabric of this type quality for your bindings, when you use a cotton fabric of this type for your quilt top. So instead of doing that, you'll learn where you adjust these tools. I'll talk about our 3 inches the first time around. When you practice with this, I want you to do 3 inches of binding, and I've got a 3-inch piece here, and this is cheap, stiff fabric, cut straight of grain. I probably just violated 3 things that if you've ever read a quilt book or you've ever had a quilt instructor, they're going to tell you to do exactly the opposite of what I've done. Normally you use a good fabric of good quality, which later on you can do that, but a stiff, cheap fabric is not going to have the pull that a good fabric has. Cutting straight of grain versus cutting on bias will make all the difference when you're learning to use the tools. And then 3 inches. 3 inches gives you a little bit more fabric than your 2 1/4 or 2 1/2, which is what most quilters start out with. I actually do prefer a 3-inch wide binding now. It gives me a little bit more to play with and adds a little bit of variety to your projects. But you can have your binding cut as wide as 6 3/4 of an inch. That's going to give you a finished inch on some projects for baby projects where you've got a high loft batting. And you can cut it as narrow as 2 inches, so right about there. So anywhere from 2 inches to about 6 3/4. I want you to do 3 inches when you first get started. The 3 inches, you can see where I've got this screw. Let me adjust it a little bit further down. If you'll look at where this screw is on our slide, I've got a slide here and I've got a slide over here. We're going to be adjusting that screw so that it's about 3/4 of the way down, maybe 5/8. And I'll talk about in the belly, so you'll see in a little bit that I'll be using this tool in the belly. When you adjust each side, you're going to adjust it for the width of your binding. Now a few more things on this tool. The black handles. We use the black handles when we place this on. Let me adjust those evenly. When we place this onto our fabric, we use the black handles to open up and to take off. Other than that, you'll never use the black handles. You only use it to place this on and to take it off your fabric. So you're using that to hold as you're placing it on. When you're holding the tool, typically you'll hold it like this or like this. And you'll see me at the sewing machine doing stitching in the ditch, and then I'll also show you hand binding as well. The other thing that I want to point out is your edges. These 2 edges, this piece here and this piece here, should be even. Now I'll talk about even and uneven, and we'll look at the difference between those 2. But this edge here should equal that edge there. That's how we always start out with the tool. We adjust evenly. Once you've adjusted the tool, I'll come back and adjust this side that's slanted a little bit longer. I refer to it as a hair, a smidge, a scant, a skosh, a wee bit, because